I'm trying to keep it PG because I know I have some minors on my channel. I'm like so nervous trying to describe this book. What up, my channel? Welcome back to another video. I'm Jessie E. This is Ravenclaw, and you're watching. Why, hello there. This video is going to be my July wrap-up. In the month of July, I read 10 books, 7 books, and 3 graphic novels. They ranged from 2 stars all the way to 5 stars. From this point on, I'm going to be doing something kind of special in my wrap-ups. For every book or comic that I wrap up, I'm going to share with you some sort of anecdote from my life, a meme that I really thought was funny, pretty much anything that happened during the month that I'm wrapping up my reads for. July was also really special because I gave myself a buddy read challenge. I tried to buddy read as many books as possible, and I had such a good freaking time. I want to continue doing buddy reads. I put up a tweet on my Twitter. I pretty much asked people if they wanted to buddy read books with me, and some people were like, is it okay if we're not mutuals? And I said, absolutely. Anytime y'all want to buddy read a book with me, just hit me up. I don't care if we're mutuals. I don't care if we're friends or not. I feel like I'm a very approachable person, and I love to read. I especially love to make new book friends. So literally anytime that you guys want to read a book with me, just hit me up and let me know, and we will make it happen. I'm just gonna tackle these books in the order that I read them. The first book that I read during the month of July was Tell Me How You Really Feel by Amina May Safi. Since she has first laid eyes on her, Rachel has been unable to stand Sana. Pretty rich, popular Sana who has gotten everything she has ever wanted. When Rachel, who is an aspiring young director, is forced to cast none other than Sana in her upcoming film project, or else lose her scholarship, Rachel and Sana must put aside their differences and work together. But when a romance begins to blossom between the two of them, these girls must decide whether hate is sweeter than love. I actually discussed this book in my recent 8 books that wasted my time video, so if you want to see my complete thoughts on it, feel free to check that video out. However, this is sold as a hate to love romance, but I actually don't agree with that because Sana never hated Rachel. All of the hostility came from Rachel herself. Rachel was just honestly very mean and grouchy, just kind of a crappy person in general, and that's not exactly hate to love for me. Like, both characters must hate each other and then fall in love with each other for it to truly be hate to love. Now, there were a lot of things about this book that I did really like. First of all, I buddy read it with Sajid from Books Are My Social Life. I liked that the sexuality wasn't something the characters had to grapple with. It was just natural. Sana is Indian and Persian, and Rachel is Mexican and Jewish, and I loved the biracial rep. I loved that their identities were represented with a lot of positivity and nuance, and I really liked that both of these girls were very career-driven. I read this book super excited to get some hate-to-love female-female romance, and that's not exactly what I got. So if you want to hear all of the ways that this book disappointed me, check out my 8 books that wasted my time video. Read, I read Monday's Not Coming by Tiffany D. Jackson with Jessica from Jess Nicole Dickerson. Jess is just one of the sweetest, most bubbly, amazing people ever, and I loved this buddy read with her. Claudia and her best friend Monday are thick as thieves, but after a summer of not hearing from Monday, Claudia returns from camp not only extremely confused, but extremely worried. When Claudia realizes that Monday is actually missing, she stops at nothing, contacting the police and school officials to get them concerned about why Monday is not in school. In her heart, Claudia knows that something is absolutely wrong and can't figure out why people aren't looking for Monday. Time passes, Claudia begins to reach out to Monday's relatives and finds that things are worse than she feared. Monday might not just be missing, she might be missing for good. This is a YA thriller that had me on the edge of my seat, but wow, this book was incredible. First of all, it had some of the most beautiful, rich descriptions of blackness and black girl culture that I've ever read. Everything from slicking back your edges to having to sit for hours, grueling hours getting your hair cornrowed. I loved the way black skin and culture was described. It's disability and synesthesia rep. It's not explicitly stated as synesthesia, but Claudia does have a learning disability and she frequently describes her feelings and emotions as colors. Her synesthesia is also connected to her learning disability. But I loved seeing a black character with a disability because we so frequently exclude black people from our narratives about being disabled or about mental health. It was just really, really wonderful to see that represented so well in this book. Oh, and we have to talk about the writing. It was literally never mechanical. It was so vivid with the imagery, and it had actual believable dialogue. The kids in the story are fairly young. Yes, the writing was pretty sophisticated, but I think that it works because Claudia is a highly perceptive perceptive and intelligent protagonist. So I liked that the writing was kind of intense because personally, when I was a kid, I used to read a lot of adult books because the writing in young adult books just didn't suit me. Oh my gosh. And the thriller elements of this book felt so real and personal. You could tell that the stakes were high. There was a lot of death and danger in this book, and I actually really appreciated that because I could tell that the author really wasn't holding anything back on the thriller or the suspense aspect of the story. It truly was a skillfully mysterious and suspenseful tale. And the reason it felt so real is because Jackson made sure to include elements of Claudia's life that didn't have to do with her search for Monday. Claudia is a dancer. You know, she's struggling with school. She is a devout Christian, and she has a really supportive, strong Black family that's standing behind her, and I really appreciated the representation of a healthy Black family in a YA book because so often I see representation for very dysfunctional Black families, which can most certainly be the case, but it was nice to see some positive familial rep for once. Now, I both listened to the audiobook and physically read this book, and the audiobook was fantastic. By the end of the book, I just switched over to audio because it was so good. It was like a movie. This book has so many important themes, especially about how racism and gentrification and poverty can negatively impact Black people's mental health, really the health of anybody who is suffering under these systems. There was a lot of conversation, very subtle conversation about Blackness and mental health and Blackness and disability. And I feel like we very often don't realize that suffering things like racism, suffering from social prejudice can literally make somebody sick. That these things are so hard to deal with that they can negatively impact one's health. And I don't think we realize that. When I was first starting college, I read a study that found that Black women consistently have babies that are premature, and for the longest time, people were thinking it was just because there's something about the Black female body that produces underweight babies. But in reality, that's not the case. They found when people would immigrate from Africa, within a couple generations, their babies would start to be underweight. Realize that it's not that the Black female body is just bad at carrying babies, it's that the stress and the societal pressures that we put Black women under causes them to have premature children, which is really freaking horrifying and is definitely a reproductive rights issue. Anyway, the book was a lot of commentary on how people just don't care when Black girls go missing, and this is also something that I researched when I was in college. I specifically did some research surrounding how people react when white kids go missing, when Asian kids and Latinx kids go missing, and then Black kids. Our research found that the darker that the child was, the less likely they were to be featured on the news as missing, more likely they were to be talked about as if they were a runaway and not a kidnapping victim, and they received less time on screen or being written about in the newspaper. This book did so many things well. It did social commentary well, did the thriller and horror aspects really well, the character development, everything. Like, Jess and I both really loved this book. I will say it definitely comes with all sorts of trigger warnings. All the stars, just take all my stars. That I read was The Night Before by Wendy Walker, which I ended up giving 2 stars. This is an adult thriller about Laura and Rosie. Laura, who is neurotic, temperamental, and absolutely obsessed with the idea of falling in love. Rosie is the doting older sister who has a loving and stable family, but when Laura suddenly shows up on her doorstep without a word and asks to stay with her, Rosie begins to get increasingly concerned, especially when Laura goes on a date with a man that she met online and never comes home. As time passes and friends and family begin the search for Laura, Rosie starts to wonder not what this man may have done to Laura, but what may Laura have done to him. I was really excited about this book because Wendy Walker wrote All Is Not Forgotten, which was a book that I really enjoyed last year. And true to Walker form, there's a lot of psychology and twists and turns in this book, but it just didn't have the pizzazz that I wanted. Rosie's character literally only existed to further Laura's plotline. Rosie literally felt like she was there to search for her missing sister. Throughout this entire book, we learned so much about Laura, and the only thing that we learn about Rosie is that she loves her family. There were a lot of plot holes, and I just didn't believe the plot in general. It did have one of my favorite tropes, which is a group of childhood friends piecing together their memories of the past to understand something that's going on in the present. I love that. But yeah, overall, the fear aspect wasn't there for me. The writing that was subpar, in my opinion. So unfortunately, I had to give this one 2 stars. Then I read The Love and Lies of Rukhsana Ali, which was recommended to me highly by my friend Sajid. When Bengali American teenager Rukhsana is caught kissing her girlfriend, her very conservative Muslim parents freak out and promptly whisk her away to her family in Bangladesh. They force her into an arranged marriage and think all of their problems have been solved. But they do not count on Rukhsana's individuality or her resilience, and she will stop at absolutely nothing to get back to America and to get back to the girl that she loves. This is another book that I both read and listened to the audiobook for, and I was really excited to be reading it, especially because Sajid loves it so much, and it honestly didn't disappoint me. It was so rich and vivid. I really liked the writing a lot. Rukhsana is a complex character and her home life is very complex. I love that we got to see explanations for why her parents believed the things that they believed and explanations for why Rukhsana believed what she believed. One thing that frustrated me about the book was the love interest. I can't even remember her name. I omitted it from my memory the second I finished the book because I hated Rukhsana's girlfriend so much. I did not understand why Rukhsana was so in love with this whiny, self-centered girl. This is a book where you come to very deeply care about all of the side characters. Even the ones that you don't necessarily like, you're still curious to see how the plot is going to turn out. And even though Rukhsana's family puts her literally through the ringer, literally through hell and back, they do some of the most horrible, despicable things to her, you're still very invested in everything working out in the end, in Rukhsana patching things up with her family. I'm not gonna say whether that happens or not, but you're still invested in the idea of a happy ending for all of these characters. I ended up giving it, and I talked about this in my 5-star LGBTQIA reads video, so if you want more of my thoughts on this, you should definitely check out that video. I ended up giving it like 4.5 stars officially. I think I give it 5 stars on Goodreads, just because there were some parts where the writing just didn't really feel effectual to me. And I'm still swooning over this next book, Bend in the Stars by Rachel Barenbaum. This was another buddy read. I read this with Linda from Just a Bookaholic, and she is so funny and sharp and just intelligent, and I would totally buddy read a book with her in the future. This book also has one of the most complex plots that I've literally ever read. So I feel like no matter what I say about this plot, the synopsis I'm about to give you, I'm gonna leave something major out.
I'm gonna do my best, okay? I'm just out here doing my best.
I'm like so nervous trying to describe this book. Vanya and Miri are two siblings living in anti-Semitic Russia in 1914. Tensions are high as Jewish people everywhere are being stripped of their rights, having unlawful curfews imposed upon them. Only Jewish people who are deemed useful are able to maintain any positions of power or careers of any type. But Miri and Vanya are two Jewish siblings that are much more than just useful. Miri is the first female surgeon in all of Russia, and Vanya is a wildly intelligent astrophysicist who is working hard to disprove Einstein's theory of relativity. Both Miri and Vanya live with their babushka, a fierce and wildly intelligent woman. Thankfully, their babushka has raised them in the ways of martial arts, tactics, and escapism, traits that they are desperately going to need if they want to escape Russia alive. I know historical fiction isn't popular on BookTube, but you guys, I need you to put your prejudice aside, okay? Because this book is so good. There are so many plot lines in this story, and they were woven together perfectly. And because the plot lines were so well balanced and full, you got to really get to know these characters. And I'm still swooning over it, you guys. I'm still swooning. This book has some of my favorite tropes of all time. You have a platonic male-female relationship, a sibling bond. You have an elder main character, badass, slithering, super cunning characters who are mainly women, epic storytelling, and an action-driven plot with morally ambiguous characters, and lots of deception. And don't even get me started on the romance. I was on Twitter acting a freaking fool over the romance. I've always been confused about why y'all are dead on the floor over these YA boys until I met Yuri. Now I have seen the light.
Or more like lust.
This review could easily be me saying Yuri's name for 4 minutes, and I would still think it was a completely valid assessment of this work. Don't get me wrong, I loved Miri. Vanya kind of got on my nerves because he was a little naive. There is a love triangle in this book, and I think it was the most well done love triangle that I have ever read in my entire life, so do not let that put you off. But the love triangle is it was one of my favorite parts of the book. And I also love books that have a journey where characters are traveling over many miles. So like literally all of my favorite tropes are in this book, and I really think you should read it. I do want to say that there is trigger warnings for like violence, war, anti-Semitism, sexual assault. I'm trying to keep it PG because I know I have some minors on my channel.
but Yuri could get it.
For those who have read this book, all I'm gonna say is that scene with the eye. You know the scene I'm talking about. Oh, so hot. If I had an ounce of the desire for real men that I feel for Yuri, I would probably be straight.
Oh, even saying that made my eye twitch.
Next, I read Superbs Volume 1, 2, and 3, and I'm in the middle of Volume 4, and as usual, I'm loving this series. I'm so glad that I picked it back up. I feel like you gotta be new here if you don't know what this comic is about, because I gush about this all the time. When a meteorite strikes Youngstown, Ohio, some of the kids find that the particulates of the meteor are warping their DNA, resulting in superpowers. After one of these highly superpowered kids accidentally levels the school when he loses control of his powers, metal detectors go up in front of the school designed to sniff out and catch the kids with abilities. If you are a child with an ability, you are taken from the school to a secret facility and experimented upon for any number of nefarious purposes. Jonah is a superpowered individual himself who has been able to escape the metal detectors, as is his best friend, Kayla. Both Kayla and Jonah have different abilities and will stop at nothing to take down this organization and liberate the kids of Youngstown, Ohio. Now, one of my favorite things about this book, besides the fact that the art is so freaking amazing, is that it centers a Black female main character and a main character that has Down syndrome. I love that the book never makes a big deal out of the fact that Jonah has Down syndrome. It's mentioned a couple times. He is drawn differently than the rest of the characters. And I feel like this comic tackles moral ambiguity really well. The villain in this comic is one of my favorite villains because he truly believes that he's protecting the kids of Ohio. He truly believes that he's doing this for the greater good. And so in some ways you can root for him and understand him. And this is the nuance in the villains that I'm looking for. This is the nuance that was lacking in the villains from Internment and from Girls with Sharp Sticks. I talked about both of those books in my disappointing reads video. We have an Asian female character that isn't skinny, and I absolutely love that because most comic book characters are drawn to be incredibly thin, so it's nice to have a realistic representation of a female body. This story did take one turn that I'm very confused about. I think it was at the start of Volume 3. All of a sudden, Jonah had been kidnapped and was in this institution, and there was no explanation of how he got there. It still hasn't been explained, so if you've been reading this comic and you know what I'm talking about, can you please explain what happened, because I'm very confused. I don't really feel the need to rate this series, but it is one of my favorite comic series of all time, and even though it's taken some turns that I'm confused about, I'm 100% invested in the story. I want to see where it goes. The 9th book is one I was sent for review, and this is The Tales of the Astonishing Black Spark by Charlie Eskew. I was so excited to read this, especially after getting back into my Superb comics. This tells the story of Donald, who is as mediocre as they come until he is struck by lightning and wakes up in a hospital with white hair, bright eyes, and the power to control electricity. I love the trope of a natural disaster giving somebody superpowers, and this book is a book for fandoms everywhere. There are so many references to Firefly and to Green Lantern and Patton Oswalt, and it's just a nerd fest all the way. It actually reads a lot like a comic book, and you're following all of the antics that Donald finds himself getting into as a result of having these superpowers. There are a lot of political conversations in here, and I like the imagining of what it would be like to be both Black and to have superpowers. I thought that was really cool and really well done. I like the explanation of his powers. I think that if you're a big fan of comics, you are totally going to love this because it totally reads like a comic book. That was kind of its downfall for me in some ways because I hate the trope of breaking the fourth wall. This is really big in Deadpool comics, and this book breaks the fourth wall a lot, and Donald will talk directly to the reader. And that's a tactic that makes me feel like I'm reading a story. It makes me feel more distant as opposed to making me feel closer to the story. I ended up giving this 3.5 out of 5 stars just because it was so jarring and it made it really tough for me personally to get into the book, but I do recommend it, and I think it was pretty freaking awesome.
I always feel like somebody's watching me, and I have no promise.
And my last read for July was none other than I Wish You All the Best by Mason Deaver. When 17-year-old Ben DeBacher comes out to their parents, they are promptly kicked out of their house into the cold. Ending up with their estranged sister that they haven't seen in 10 years, Ben finds themselves starting a new school and meeting a very strange boy named Nathan. Nathan is charming and charismatic and funny and all of the things that Ben currently isn't feeling during this incredibly grievous time. But as a romance starts to bud between Ben and Nathan, they start to wonder if coming out again is a good idea. Now, this book was our first book club pick for Beyond the Binary, the book club that I have with Crescent Moon Reads. And we had a whole premiere video talking about this book, so if you want to see our thoughts on it, definitely check out that video. The first thing that I'm gonna say is I feel like people aren't realizing that this book cover is totally designed based off of the non-binary flag. I mean, you see it, right? Super cool. This is one of my favorite covers of 2019 just because of how cleverly it's done. I thought that the non-binary rep was awesome, the anxiety rep was awesome. In its own voices, Mason Deaver is a non-binary author themselves, and there's a lot of things that this book did really well. I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars to the shock of literally everybody, and if you want to see why, check out that video. And it's only like 10 minutes long. I feel like we get to the point pretty quickly in the video. If you made it this far in the video, let me know by putting a trident emoji in the comment section. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I would absolutely love it if you would join my Dapper family. Feel free to hit that notification bell so that you never miss any content from Bowties and Books. And if you would like daily content from me, you should check me out on my Bookstagram. I'm always in the stories posting book reviews, booksta rants, memes, all kinds of shit that nobody cares about. Until next time, stay sharp, and I will see you in my next video.